It's a special interview that we're doing with a Star Wars customizer who goes by the name Thank the Maker. And what we're going to discuss here today is the whole entire process of 3D printing Star Wars custom action figures, dioramas, and vehicles. It's a subject I haven't really seen covered very much in the Star Wars community. If it has, I just haven't been exposed to it, and I just felt like it's a gap or it's a hole or it's just an area that I think needs to be discussed. It's new technology. Not a lot of us know how to use it. And I figured this is a great time. And I found an artist who has been working in this medium, and why not take advantage of his knowledge and, pass that knowledge on to all of you. And to do that, I have the Star Wars customizer, Thank the Maker. Uh, Thanks for coming on with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is going to be a fun time.
So what got you into even wanting to create Star Wars things?
Well, first off, I think the love for Star Wars. It's, Star Wars has been around since I was 6 years old. That's when the film came out in 1977. And there was pretty much nothing else like it. We had the original Star Trek and maybe Planet of the Apes, but Star Wars really just went like an exploding Death Star. It was amazing. And I collected the figures like everybody did. And unfortunately, after 1983, the following year, the toy industry for the Star Wars just kind of died. And we got lucky again with in the late 90s, I believe, with the ridiculously buff Star Wars figures, which I like to call Star Wars Masters of the Universe collection. And they got really good for a long time, but they failed in creating some amazing things. And I found myself basically wanting to make those things. So at a very young age, I started picking up, styrofoam and cardboard and the hot glue gun, which is a great invention of the early 80s. And was just making my own, play sets. Making figures was a little harder because they were so small and detailed. But, if I could make my own Ewok Village sets. And so that's what kind of got me interested. Being an artist, being raised by artistic people in my family, we're all artists, kind of gave me that outlet, allowed me to work with those materials and move on. So Star Wars is awesome. Being an artist is awesome. So I'd like to combine the two. And now I'm, customizing my own action figures, roughly droids right now, but I'll move on to more organic. But ships, vehicles, play sets, and that's how it kind of all started. And here I am today.
So I guess when did you start getting to the point where you decided intensively this is what I'm going to do? Is it like a recent development where you got back into it after doing it in your childhood, or have you just been consistently doing it since you were a kid?
It's kind of been going back and forth, but within just the last year, I was fortunate enough to be friends with a guy whose name is Brian Rowe, and he worked in the film industry and worked with people like Stan Winston Studios, and he was also the one of the engineers who designed the teddy bear in the movie AI. He's no longer in the industry because the Hollywood went to computer graphics, characters, and no longer was using the old school stuff. Luckily, that's coming back now. But he moved about a town away from me, and we ran into each other at a Burger King drive-thru. And that was funny because I was ordering inside, and he was at the drive-thru window. And I saw the window open up, and there was his head, and I'm like yelling at him. the people thought I was a crazy maniac, but I'm like, don't go anywhere. I need your number. And so we, he pulled over and, oh, what are you doing and stuff. And so he goes, you've got to come to my house. I've got something to show you. It's going to change your life. And so, needless to say, I went to his house and he showed me a 3D printer. Now, I have heard of 3D printing, thought it was amazing because it reminded me of like an earlier version of Star Trek's Replicator. Basically having something come out of this box, which wasn't there. So he showed it to me, and I thought it was the coolest thing. And his first thing he printed out for me was an actual action figure stand with a little peg. And I thought, whoa, I need some more of these. So, that was my first initial thought, was just more figures, more stands for figures. I went home that night and I couldn't sleep. My brain just kept on thinking about all the different things that I could make with a 3D printer. It took a while, but I managed to buy one. And I'd say the last probably 6 months, I've been 3D printing. It took about a month to figure the whole thing out. But right now, it's like nothing can stop me. I'm just building, and it's like a miracle. It's really amazing.
Okay, so now you said that you bought the printer. Roughly how much? Like, I know from what I've seen, it appears that the price range for 3D printers varies. I mean, you have models that probably, would you say they start in like the $1,000 range, and then they can go all the way up to like $1 million? Because I think Hasbro said they bought like $1 million 3D printer for what they're doing.
Yeah, I did a little research, and I found out you can get 3D printers for $300, $1,000, or a couple $1,000s. I thought, well, I'm going to try it, $1,000. Because I was afraid that I'd get a $300 one and I can only print something this small, and a small bed on it. I wanted something a little bit bigger to allow me to make bigger parts. So I went with about $1,000, and it seems to be a really great printer. The name of the printer is Flashforge, and what's unique about it is it's actually made of wood. It has a wood casing that was 3D laser printed. So it looks homemade. It's kind of funny, but it works really well. After it took me a while to figure out how it actually works, and that's the real trick with 3D printers. People tend to believe that you just go and buy a 3D printer and you press a button and the parts are going to come out, like as if you were to buy a microwave. You buy a microwave, you bring it home, you plug it in, you stick a potato in it, and it bakes it, and you eat it. That's what I thought the 3D printer was going to be like. And it turns out that there was a lot more work involved. So just remember, when you're buying a 3D printer, whether it's a $300 or $1,000 or a couple $1,000s, there is a learning curve. It's going to take you a while to figure out the little niches, and it definitely has a behavior of its own. And we'll talk about that as well as we go on through it. But it is definitely worth it. If you really want to get into custom building of play sets or ships, that's definitely the way to go.
What would you, I guess, for someone who just wanted to start out, is there any like necessary things that they would need other than the 3D printer itself to get started?
Right. Thanks. Yeah, you're going to need a program. You're going to need a 3D program that allows you to build models digitally so that it can be, coded and converted to the 3D printer itself. The program that I'm using is called 123D Design, and you can actually download this for free as long as your computer can handle it. One of the problems I had was I have an older Mac, and it just wouldn't download. It just, so you need pretty much a newer computer. You'd have to figure out the specs for it. It's an easy program, at least it was for me. You got to remember, I've been an artist my whole life. I think three-dimensionally already. So it was almost like came second nature to me. So it's fairly easy in the sense it's like taking blocks and circles and being able to manipulate those blocks and those circles. You can stretch a block, thin it. You can take a circle and cut into it to make it like a half circle, or you can make it oblong. And with the ability to manipulate, these different objects, these common everyday objects, you're allowed to stick them together and then build onto it. And that's how you're able to create a 3D model of what you want the 3D printer to print out. To me, that's the easy part. That's the fun part, getting to spend hours just creating this thing, and you can get really detailed down to the finest detail. But you have to also take into consideration that your 3D printer machine can only do so much detail. That's what I learned in the process. Like when I built one of my first droids, I had all these amazing little tiny details. And then when I printed it, it didn't show up on the model. And I thought, oh man, how am I gonna bring out these fine details? I learned that I had to over exaggerate some of the objects on the droids, and so that the machine itself was able to print it. And so there's like little things like that you learn in the process. Everything looks beautiful on the program itself, but then when you print it, you realize that it doesn't work out in real life. So you have to go back to the drawing board, make some changes, make something larger, so there is kind of a learning curve that you definitely have to experiment a lot. Like if you want to create something with a socket, where you have a ball and a socket, it works perfect on the computer and it can roll around and you're like, okay, this works. But then when you 3D print it, you try to get it to work, you're thinking, oh man, I'm gonna have to go back and maybe shrink the ball a little bit more so it can snap in. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that going on when you're in the world of 3D printing. So, but if you have a computer that can run the program and you don't have a 3D printer, still download it, learn the program, make a couple of droids or ships or whatever. So when that time comes and you actually do buy a 3D printer, you have something. You got something ready to go. And I think that's what I think. I made 6 droids and 2 vehicles before I even had my machine. But then I learned quickly that I had to make some adjustments. I had to go back and fix them a little bit because it didn't quite turn out in the actual 3D print. So, but there are. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, as far as like the program, did you just basically search on Google and then they just give you a list of available programs and you just kind of pick the one? You basically at the time, but probably because you invested like $1,000 for your software right now.
Well, luckily, I had the advantage of my friend who's already into 3D printing, so I didn't have to do that much research as far as what kind of program to look for. He said, this is the program you need, go to it, it'll be perfect for what you're doing. And so I just went to the 123ddesign.com, I guess.
Now, is there a dash between the 3 and the D on the 3D design part of it?
I don't think there's a dash. I just think it's 123 capital D. Okay. I think, and then there's a capital D, and then design, for design.
Yeah, for design.
But if you Google it, you know, Google's going to correct it and say, did you mean? And yeah, so there's other 3D printing programs out there, but according to my friend Brian, the special effects guy,
Yeah.
said this is one of the best as far as the free programs go.
Okay.
He actually has a program that he pays for, and it, you know, I just don't have the money right now to pay for a program I'm already using.
Look at what is it? Is it what's the one Hasbro uses? Is it ZBrush or ZBrush or?
Okay, yeah, ZBrush is something that would be my next venture,
Yeah,
and that's going to allow more organic.
$900 itself, wasn't it?
What was that?
That's a pretty hefty price. It's like around 800 or 900 for that program, isn't it?
Right. And if you're
Yeah.
lucky, you know somebody who has it.
Yeah.
But it is pretty hefty. But if you want to do more organic type of printing, like a head or a beast of burden, that's more of the type of program you're going to want to go with than one, two,
Where it
three.
has almost like you're working with clay instead of like gears
Right.
or boxes.
Like blocks.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more like a clay, you know, digital clay that you have tools that you can like sculpt and create lines and morph. Yeah, that's exciting because my ultimate goal is eventually, after making robots and ships, I want to start making some of the amazing creatures that's in the Star Wars universe that Kenner or Hasbro hasn't even touched. And there's a lot of them, especially we have the Clone Wars, and I think there's at least one creature per episode. It seems like they always introduced some new animal in the Star Wars universe, and there'll be endless supply to create on for that.
Oh, agreed. I've been diving into the Clone Wars with creatures and characters, and I never really got the reason I find a lot of interest in what you're doing. I never really got into the droids because, as someone who sculpts by hand, getting everything symmetrical and to match and make, you know, one side be an exact replica of the other side, you know, throughout an entire figure head to toe is extremely challenging. So knowing that there's a program who will do that for me right off the bat, and then you could just print it, that's really appealing. Right. And I think this is a technology that a lot of customizers would love to add to their toolbox. And, you know, that's why I want to just absorb everything that we're going to learn here today.
Yeah, you know, it's 3D printing has been around actually for at least over 10 years, if I remember correctly. I remember hearing about it, but it's not until now that it's actually pretty available for the common person and affordable. So I have a feeling we're going to see a lot more customers, you know, buying 3D printers. Eventually, we will. Because I hope this never happens, but if it does, then, you know, hey, there might become a time where we won't need Hasbro to make us anything, because we'll all just be doing it ourselves, and that's unfortunate. But it seems like that seems to be kind of the path I see where we're going as far as fans go of the figures. But if your common person can make toys, and not having to wait around for Hasbro to make a sail barge, for God's sakes, it's like, that's great news. You know, we all want a sail barge, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So long, and it feels like it's too late now because we're already into all these new movies, and that's just old news. But I really believe that
there's a Canadian couple called, they go by McRobo Creations, and they make sail barges in multiple sizes, actually, depending on, you know, what you're looking for as far as like space you have in your collection room. But they've been fabricating, you know, sail barges for maybe a year or 2 years now. But if you go to my blog, there's a link in the sidebar, you know, to get in touch with them. But yeah, no, I mean, that's what I love. I mean, we're at the point now too where you're seeing the quality of figures and the quality of vehicles. You know, they said they're targeting 6 to 10-year-olds. So what are collectors to do? And, you know,
Yeah.
this technology is great for collectors, especially if you have an artistic side.
For us, the collectors, we can make ships that don't shoot out Nerf bullets. And that's great.
I agree. I agree. Um, so as far as I guess you need some type of plastic medium for the printer to use.
Right.
How much does that run, and how much of it do you need for something that you're printing?
Yeah. Now, of what I'm aware of, um, I know of two plastics. There's ABS and PLS. And each one has different properties and they act differently. Um, the ABS is a chemical compound. It's man-made materials, and it has a shrink rate, so that after you print it, I think it shrinks a little bit, a couple millimeters. And I don't like that idea, because if I'm trying to make something precise and I want it to fit onto something else and it shrinks, that's not going to work for me. Um, the material that I'm working with is PLS, and don't ask me what they stand for because I don't. But
Okay.
PLS is actually made of sugar cane and some weird syrup, but it's basically it's organic material. And when you're printing with PLS, it actually smells like somebody's making pancakes. There's kind of a syrupy smell in the air, and it's better for the environment and you, because when you print with the ABS, you have to have a well vented area, because it clearly smells like you're burning plastic. Um, you get a roll, you get like a spool, and I spend $20 on my spool, and you can, especially if you're making like little figures, you can go through. I mean, you can make. I'm trying to think, like over 100 figures on one spool. I
Really?
mean, oh yeah.
Wow.
I mean, just blah blah. I recently, the ship that I'm working on, the White Witch, which I know there's a lot of people who know what the White Witch is, and there's still a lot of people who don't know
Oh yeah,
the
we
White
have.
Witch.
I know our website probably has viewers our own age, older, and I even have children. I mean,
Yeah,
younger than ours,
right.
than our children.
Well,
They're from 5
yeah,
and above.
right. Yeah, I get a lot of people who see the picture of my ship, the White Witch, and go like, "What is this from? Is this even Star Wars?" Yeah, and then I have to like show them like a YouTube video of the opening of the cartoon, and they're blown away. They have no idea that that had ever existed. But when I 3D printed that ship, I went through two spools um, of the plastic. Oh, by the way, it looks like you. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, perfect.
Actually, I have to. Yeah, if I talk, people will see it.
Yeah.
If I stay silent,
Okay.
look at you. But
Yeah. You
so
disappeared
this
there for
is
a
what
minute.
you
I
have
thought,
so
oh,
far,
perfect.
right? For the White
Yeah.
Witch.
That's the White Witch that's not painted. You're probably thinking, why
Yeah,
is it called the White Witch when it's completely black?
yeah. This is a work in progress.
Yes.
So far,
Yeah.
now you said that when you made this, you actually
Uh,
had to build it in parts as you went
right.
along and basically assemble it as you went. And then
Yes.
you also said that I guess the way it's been explained to me is when you do 3D printing, sometimes there's visible lines
Yeah.
within the print itself, and you
Right.
went back and then you added like almost like a Bondo or
Like
fix
an
it,
acrylic. Yeah.
yeah, an epoxy to kind of like fill in the spaces between those lines, so you had like a smooth structure.
Right.
Um, so this is basically after things have been assembled, things have been smoothed out, and then you basically it looks like there's a primer coat on that.
Yes. Yeah. Mm. And yeah, so it took about two spools, and that's like $40 in material, and
Okay.
that's pretty good. I mean, that's how much you would probably pay for that vehicle on the shelves. Um, Now, as far as the time it takes to put it all together, that's a whole different story. That's a lot of work. But you're right. that ship had to been, when I made a 3D model of it, it was all in one piece. I had to break it down so that the 3D printer itself could print out the parts. I only have a 9x9 by let's see, 9x6x9 area that the 3D printer can actually print an object.
Now is that, I
So
mean, 9 inches by 6 inches by 9 inches?
yeah, it's kind of like a 9x6, and then it's 9 upward,
Okay.
like you can print 9 inches from bottom to top.
Okay.
So I had to break the ship down so that each part could be printed, which was a task in itself. And it was kind of fun that once all the pieces printed, I got to put a piece together. Now, the other thing that you have to take into factor is how long does it take to print something. Again, I guess in our fast-paced world that we live in today, we assume that these pieces just get printed like instantaneously. The picture of the White Witch here, if you can see the nose cone, the very front part, that is 2 pieces, top and bottom. The top piece was printed, and it took 6 hours for the machine to print it from top to bottom. And then obviously the bottom half, another 6 hours. And so you got 12 hours right there just for the front of the nose cone. It took me several weeks before the ship was completely printed out. And you have to be a very patient person. I'm
So
not.
if you ever wanted to try and mass produce something that you did, you would probably suggest printing it, smoothing it out the way you have, get it all set, and then I would say probably mold it and then cast it in a plastic resin rather than printing it over and over and over again.
Yeah, yeah, and that is something that I haven't done yet, but that is definitely something I'm looking into, because I did realize that it would just take way too long. If somebody wanted to order a ship from me and said, "Yeah, I really want to buy this," I mean, I would have to charge them like $3,000 for the amount of time that's put into it.
Yeah.
For example, too.
That goes into design time.
Well, yeah, the design time. A lot of people don't factor in that the machine itself is the mileage of the machine running 24/7, trying to print these parts out as quickly as possible. There's going to be wear and tear on my machine.
Yeah.
So I got to factor that in just in case if one of the gears decides to poop out on me, I'm going to have to spend money on putting a new gear. So it would be best that if you want to get into something like this and you want to make a big 3D printed ship, your next goal is to start making silicon molds and using resins to mass produce them. So, but robots like R2 units or T3 units, then I think you're okay with still just 3D printing them.
Okay.
But you still have the option of actually making molds for them too if you want to go that route.
Okay. I guess when you were saying it took like $40 of material to make this White Witch, now is that including like having to go back and reprint certain parts because they didn't come out exactly the way you wanted them to?
Right.
Or is that like just a straight shot once you have everything exactly the way you want it?
Right. You're right. There was a couple of times where the 3D printer was having some kind of issue. I once had a piece that was almost completely finished, and for whatever reason, it snapped off of the printing table and it fell over. Once that happens, your piece is done. You're doomed. You wasted all that time and material, which is very unfortunate. So you have to keep in mind also when you're working with a 3D printer that of something going wrong is going to happen. For an example, let's say you're living in a part of the United States where there's a lot of bad weather, and you're printing a piece. You're like 6 hours into it. You've got 30 minutes, or let's say even halfway through, and the electricity goes out, and your machine stops. It just doesn't like start up again after the power comes back on. It reboots, and you have to start all over again. So you have to always think about that, especially when you're making bigger pieces. The other factors that you have to think about when you're using a 3D printer is the temperature of the room. I learned quickly that during the summer and during the hottest days, my printer did not like working very well. The material didn't like sticking to the bottom plate, and it was constantly being knocked off. And so I would have to wait until it was cooler in the night so that my pieces would stick to the table. Because of all those things happening, I went online and I had to do some research, and I found out that there are other methods of to stick better, which I didn't like hairspray, taking hairspray and spraying it onto the table, or taking a hot glue stick and rubbing it onto the table. Those are other methods, but those are messy methods, because after you're done printing, you're going to have to clean it all up to start all over again. So your best bet is that if you have a 3D printer, you have to find the right temperature in your room for it to make a good print to allow it to stick on the table.
You have as far as temperature goes, you have like a temperature that you're like 76 is the temperature I love the most.
Yeah, I don't actually have like a thermometer or something on there. Yeah. I should be more scientific about it, yeah, and know exactly what the temperature in the room is. But right now I guess that's part of my ADHD. I just haven't had the time to really say, let me figure out exactly the temperature that needs to be. I just go, I'm going to print today. Oh, it's not turning out. It must be too hot. I'll just wait an hour or two in the night. So maybe in our next podcast, I'll have that temperature for you. But right now, I have no idea. You'll have to guesstimate yourself, I guess. But yeah, that was the other things that you come across when 3D printing.
That you felt like it worked best in, I guess, the colder temperatures. You said you try to keep the printer closer to the air conditioner.
There was a lot of experiments where I would take little portable fans and aim it towards the machine to see how that would work. And I don't know if it worked or not. I mean, like I said, the machines are so touchy. There are some machines that you can buy that are encased completely in a box, and you have a little door you open up, and you can pull your machine, your printed part out, and then shut it again, and it regulates the temperature in the box.
Okay.
I've seen people online actually build their own boxes to keep the temperature just right. For me, that's a lot of effort. I just, so far, I've just figured out, when the right time, and because I'm also, you've got winter, spring, summer, fall, it's going to change. I suggest if you're a little more person that pays attention to detail, then yeah, figure out what the temperature is that works perfect for you. But I'm the kind of the guy who lives on the edge and doesn't, just tries to figure it out as I go. But you definitely have to factor that in. Is perfect. Okay, so my suggestion is that you definitely find the right temperature for your machine and the environment you're in. you're better off in a colder environment than a warmer environment, because the warmer environment is going to, your plastic is going to be a little more malleable, and it's going to want to pop off of the printing table. But if you're in a colder environment, it stays rigid and sticks to the table better. So there you go. It's all about experimenting.
My second question is in regards, you were saying before that, you know, sometimes there's some wear and tear on your machine, and you may have to replace some of the parts, like gears or whatnot.
Well,
Have you ever priced out those parts to see like how much replacement parts run, as far as having, like, is it like $200 for a year? Are we talking only like $10?
right.
Have you ever looked into that?
No, because I have nothing broken down on me yet.
Okay.
So
All right.
I've been lucky. I have had to oil the parts, and just to keep everything lubricated. Other than that, so far I'm doing pretty good. I'm going to guess that they're not super cheap parts,
Yeah.
but I guess when the time comes and something breaks, I'll have to do that research and find out. But for now, I'm pretty lucky.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Um,
As far as design, I'm getting the echo again. Hold on. Okay. As far as design time, how long would you say it takes to do? I guess it would be different. Like for vehicles, I would assume it would takes longer. For a figure, I guess the amount of detail would determine how long the
right.
project takes.
Well,
Uh, what would you say are, I guess, rough estimates for a vehicle, for diorama, for figure?
right. The crazy thing about working in a 3D world on your computer is different in reality. Um, for example, if you were a customizer and you were making a small figure, it's obviously not going to take you as long as it would be if you were to make a big ship. We're talking in real life. In the 3D world, it probably took just as long to make a R2D2 as it did making the troop transport, because you're in a 3D world, and you're not working with real physical materials. It still takes as long to make a ship as it does a droid, and it determines on the level of detail. Like an R2 unit has a lot of little things over his, the trunk of his body and on the side of his arms, just as much as a ship does. The only difference is it's one is bigger and one's smaller, but in the 3D world, there's no difference, you know. So I guess it depends on how much time you really spend on it. If you are an expert in the world of 3D modeling and you've gotten it down, it's not going to take you as long. After a while, after you played with the program, you get faster. You know what certain tools does what. And but I'm going to say, when I first started off, it probably took me probably 4 to 5 hours to complete a 3D model of a droid in the beginning. It probably still would take me as long, because of droids still have an intense amount of detail. When I was building the White Witch, the most detail was in the cockpit. I had a lot of little buttons and knobs and view screens that were just as much as a droid's parts and components were. So it all depends on what you're making, just like if it was in real life. But you just got to remember that in the 3D world, you don't have to worry about material wise. And like, for example, when you're painting in real life and you have a ship this big, you have to paint from the tip to the end. Obviously, it's going to take you longer to paint that ship than it does painting a droid this big. So that's the nice thing about the 3D modeling in the world is it doesn't matter if you're modeling a ship or something this big. I guess the only time that it would really make a difference is if you were trying to model the Death Star. That would be a lot of modeling. The only problem you're going to have with trying to 3D model the Death Star is your computer going to be able to handle that much data? And good luck trying to print that sucker out. So I think you're
Yeah, that's something I never even considered. Is like, can your computer handle the data?
right. That's another thing that I also experienced was if I were to make something as small as an RT unit, my rendering didn't take as long. I noticed that when I started building some of the ships, my computer was a little more fussy. And if I tried to move the ship, if I went from the cockpit to the back and I move it, I noticed there was a small delay compared to if I had to move a smaller one. And that all depends on how
your processor
your processor and your graphics card and memory goes. So you have to also think about that as far as computer wise.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's good information for everybody too. Do you want to start like showing some of your pieces, and we could talk about each piece, like design time, print time, considerations that were needed for each one of these pieces,
Right. Right.
and give people
Yeah.
an idea of the kind of stuff that you can make.
Okay. Well, first off, I was going to. You already showed the White Witch when
Yep.
it was colored all black.
We didn't really break down, I guess, with the White Witch. We did mention that it was in several pieces. About how many pieces was that vehicle before assembly?
About 20 pieces. Yeah, it was maddening because after a while, it really felt like I was trying to put a puzzle together. That I knew, I already knew what the picture, the end result is going to be, but still, it was kind of a task. I actually.
We should probably tell people too that the White Witch is a vehicle that appeared in an old cartoon series called Droids,
Right.
that was on back in the 80s. We didn't mention that before,
Right,
but
exactly. Right. White Witch
oh,
was
you
a.
painted it.
Oh,
Nice.
right. It's not done with the paint job. It kind of it's got some Bondo, gray all over it, still. But you can now see a little bit more detail as far as what it's going to end up looking like, and and to see the size too. You can't really quite determine the size by a picture, but now that you see it in my hands, you can tell how big it is. Um, this ship was in the pilot episode of the Droids cartoon called Droids. The episode was called The White Witch, where you're introduced to a whole different characters. Thal Jovan, George Dusat, Kia Mall, and R2 and 3PO become, that's their new masters in this, this version of Star Wars.
Yeah,
And they're
essentially the
racing.
whole show followed the adventures of R2D2 and C3PO and
Right.
all the different characters that they would come across throughout
Right.
the series. And you know, they almost kind of did it in arcs, I would say, where you had some characters that were in for maybe 4 or 5 episodes, and
Right.
then maybe they wouldn't be in other ones, and you get introduced to a whole new set of characters that
Right.
R2D2 and C3PO came in contact with.
Right. I think they went through at least 3 masters, I believe, 3 different masters before the series had ended. But anyways, with the White Witch, it was like a speeder racer basically, and they raced it in the Bunta race, kind of like the Bunta Eve in the
Yep.
Phantom Menace. And I think that's where they got it from. So yeah, the White Witch basically was 20 pieces. It's about the same size as the FX light X-wing that Hasbro produced, like one of the bigger ships that has the Luke Skywalker that doesn't come out. but its head moves. So it's roughly about that size. So it's a big piece. But the other interesting thing about this model was I never got to see the bottom side. So I had to kind of be creative as far as what the bottom of the ship looked like. And so there's kind of a little bit of what I thought it would look like on the bottom of the White Witch. So
That looks great.
there's a lot of like wires and details.
Yeah.
And
I guess
so,
my next question,
yeah,
I ended up maybe a few years ago, there was a company called 12th Parsec,
yeah,
and they made 3D printed Ewok Village, and then later on they made the booths from the Chalmun's Cantina, from Mos Eisley Cantina, where you had like the Han Solo booth for Greedo and everything, and they had a whole light kit. But I noticed some of the plastic was softer and it could be kind of brittle. Is that the case with the type of plastic that you're using, or is it a more rigid
mine's
plastic?
mine's more rigid.
Okay.
And I believe ABS has a little more
It's
flexibility.
almost soft.
Yeah, it's definitely softer. Um, but yeah, that's why I like working with the PLS. It's more of a hard, rigid. There, some people actually can work with both, and depending on how they want, like as far as ball joints go, maybe it's best to produce the 3D print with the ABS, so there's a little more flexibility, snapping in the ball joint, so that it doesn't break or snap.
I almost feel like it's so soft though. If you snap in that ball joint, you're never gonna get it out without breaking something.
That's true. Yeah. But the other thing that we were talking about that we didn't really expand on was when you 3D print something, there is a definite um, visual lines that go through your 3D printer. That's because your 3D print is being created millimeter by millimeter. And there's different techniques to get rid of that. But the one that I found that I like the most is the buying like an acrylic coat, paint over it. Once you're done with that, you can go back and sand it down some more if you like. I believe you have a lot more control. There's other ways which is a little more extensive and, in my opinion, dangerous because that requires working with chemicals and putting your 3D object into this vat that of chemicals where the chemicals is surrounding the 3D object and melting it. And you have to pull it out at a certain time because if you allow it to stay in too long, then it melts a little too much. So it yeah, I don't know. I didn't like that idea. So I went with the acrylic paint and not paint, but silicone. But actually, it's not even silicone. It's the same stuff
I
that
did hear, I guess Smooth On is a company
yeah,
that usually do like mold materials and resins and stuff like that. I heard that they did come out with a new material
right,
specifically for eliminating those lines, but I haven't really heard a lot of feedback on how great that product is.
right. It's about as good as you are when it comes to painting it. You can gloss it
Okay.
on and
Yep.
lose all your detail, and or you can be really fine and do it.
Several coats.
Yeah, do several coats if need be. Be patient. That's one of my things I struggle with. I want to paint it and get it done and over with, and
Yeah.
I think I've ruined a couple pieces because I put it on too thick, and then once it was done, I realized that I covered up a lot of my detail, and so and you're limited to in time because the acrylic starts to harden, and you need to determine when it's time to stop painting it on because you don't want your brush getting stuck onto your object and then you try to pull it off and then you have like little brushels sticking off of your 3D model. So you need to realize
Several thin coats is probably best then.
what was that again?
Several thin coats would be
Right.
best probably.
Yeah. I think if you're really good, you can get it done in two coats and be happy with it. Um, and it'll give that nice smooth look that you're looking for. And again, you're able to sand it down if need be. I did a lot of sanding on the White Witch, a lot. And
as a sculptor who making most of my figures, I would say half the time is spent sculpting and the other half is smoothing things out and sanding and making things perfect. So
right, yeah,
you know,
a lot of work involved. Everybody sees the finished product and they just like, wow, and they have no idea the love and care that goes into it, and the hours, the man hours, and how many times also you mess up and have to start over again, but you don't tell nobody.
Yeah.
So that happens a lot. But so I wanted to show some pictures of some of the
that'd be great.
figures. I'm still new at this, so give me a few seconds.
Oh, sure. Yeah, he's got a lot of great work that I think you're all going to enjoy, from droids to vehicles to dioramas. I mean, he's really taking a good dive into like the possibilities that can be done with 3D printing. I got my exposure to his work over on Facebook. He's got a really good albums over on Facebook. If you look up Thank the Maker on Facebook in the search field, you'll come right to his page. And if you go in the photos, he's got things in albums, and I'm going to let him take it away from here.
Okay. So these two figures are my first figure that I put out. For the fans of the Knights of the Old Republic, they know that this is a T3M4 droid. And I've got two of them. I got a blue and an orange one. This little guy took several tries to get it just right, to be as close as I could to the actual character in the video game. The reason why I chose him was, number one, it's a great game, and the fact that Hasbro made the HK, I think it's HK-47 droid, the assassin droid.
Yep, the red one.
Yeah, but they didn't make T3M4. That would be like making C3PO and not R2D2. What's up with that? So I said, I've got to do this, and I didn't see, at the time, I didn't see if anybody else had made it. After a while and doing some research, there has been other custom making.
Yeah, the Clone Trooper was somebody I saw who made one.
Right. And but it's a rare custom figure. I don't see that many of them. But so he was the first one, and by the way, he's in several parts. Now, how many parts he's in? He's in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 19 parts.
Wow. Now, does he articulate, or is he more like glued together?
No, his head moves. Both his front legs go up and down, and his feet and his back feet move as well. So he's I guess you could say, a fully articulate droid.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And in the front, there's a circle, a hole you can see. That also, he comes with little droid arms, 3 different droid arms that you can interchange. And
wow, that's great.
Yeah. So that's the first droid. Let me pull up another one for you.
Okay.
If I can find it.
And that you would say that, like, how long did that take to print everything and assemble it, would you say?
By the time I was done with printing, I think T3M4 took about 4 hours of printing. And then as far as painting goes, I'm guessing maybe another 4 hours.
Okay.
So that's
and then what about design? What would you say for design time?
Well, it took me 3 different tries to make him just right. So I would definitely say maybe a total of 12 hours of design. And you got to remember, that was when also I was freshly new. I was still learning the
Okay.
program at the time, so he's kind of my first child.
Yeah. So
And
that's a good 20 hours that, the audience could possibly have to invest
oh yeah,
just to get one figure. The payoff is amazing. So it obviously it's worth the effort, especially if you have a lot of affection for one of those characters.
right.
Um, but yeah, I love the fact that they have the three different robot arms and everything. That's great.
Yeah, thank you. Now I have another droid up here. Can you see him?
Oh yeah, wonderfully.
Um, I forgot the actual name of the droid. I know he's from some video game. I haven't figured out where it is, but I found his image on Google Images, and I fell in love with him right away because he looks like a square R2 unit. And I believe it's a precursor. I think this is another Knights of the Old Republic droid, but um, he was a challenge only because, if you look below him, he's got two wheels. He's kind of like a Segway, and as far as design goes, trying to get him to stand up straight is not that easy. So you have to be an expert at balancing your figures.
Really? So he actually balances and stands on his own?
Yeah, you seeing him right now. He's completely balanced on his own. But at
Wow.
the same time, the wheels do move. But because there's grooves on his tires, um, I was able to make it so he can balance. Um, Maybe in the future, I might have to make like some kind of a stand, because if you try to set this guy on your shelf and a strong breeze comes through your room, he's most likely going to
Take out whatever's
sabotage
on the shelf.
your figure and knock down the rest. But I'm actually working on another one, which I will be probably doing a different color scheme on him. But this was a great droid. Same thing. Actually, he didn't take as long as the other droids because there was less parts. And so I think
How many parts is he?
this one is one, two, three, four, five, six, seven parts.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was very easy.
He seems like he'd be a really good candidate for this molding and casting.
Definitely. Yeah, he's straightforward. It's just definitely easy to make a mold out of him. But so that's that guy. And again, a lot of the characters that I plan on doing are characters that have never been produced ever, and that's my
Yeah,
ultimate
I could
goal.
see you making like if you did do the molding and the casting, you could probably make amazing kits where you could just make the resin cast and then sell the kit and let the people paint them and.
Right, right. Here's another droid that is from, I believe, the Knights of the Old Republic online game. I don't know the name of this droid. I just call him Rolly Butt because I'll show you the back side of him. He actually has a wheel for his butt, and that's why I call him Rolly Butt. But anyways, with this figure, I did not paint the silicone, the acrylic stuff on. This is straight out of the machine, and I painted it without, doing that.
It
That
doesn't
was
make
before I
the figure
realized
suffer in any way, though. It actually adds like a nice texture to it, I think.
it does. It does. And after I, slapped on the black to give it that dirty look, it definitely gave a greasier feel, which is what I wanted. I wanted to have that Star Wars in-lived look. So, and I'll show you the backside of him. All right, can you see the backside?
Yeah, that's great.
Right. And so you can
And
see,
how long, I guess, would it take to build like like design on something like this? How long would that take? Did that take you? And as far as like from design to execution, what would you say the total amount of time spent to create something like that would be?
yeah, let me think about this. I'm going to say probably definitely over 24 hours worth of work.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely yeah, I mean, this guy didn't take, I mean, this guy probably took as long as the T3M4 because he has a lot more going with him, with his different parts and stuff. And he also is in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, about 15 parts um, that you have to piece together. A lot of people think that when I print these things, I'm printing them all in one piece. Like from top to bottom, he's done. And if you want your figure to be fully articulate, you're going to have to break him apart in the 3D program and print each part separately. And that's the best way to go.
How do you, I guess my question would be, because they are articulated and you have to make pieces fit into each other uh, at those, at the points where they do articulate,
Right.
how do you get them to stay in that, how do you get them to, I guess, attach and stay attached?
Well, at this point in time, I've been very lucky with droids in the fact that unlike the human or alien characters, um, things are more mechanical. So it's very easy just to glue the pieces and snapping them into place. For example, this droid here, his back wheel, there is a wooden rod that is going through the wheel onto the silver uh, components. And then the silver components go up onto the body of the droid, and they're just snapped into little nubs.
Okay. So when you design them, do you design them for that snap feature, or is it
Yes.
just been luck where they naturally?
Well, it took a couple of ideas to make sure. I almost had to create the design of how things were going to be pieced together separately, print them out, and actually see if they worked or not. Does this piece fit into this piece? I learned the hard way by making droids and then realizing that the pieces don't fit and that I would have to go back and make a design change, then print it out again, and then see if it worked. So there's a lot of going back and forth and trying to figure out, is this going to work in the real world? So
Now with the software, I guess my question would be, do they give you like specific measurements, like this hole is 3 millimeters, this rod is 3 millimeters, or are you basically hoping that it's going to measure out the way you want, and the program itself never tells you exactly what the measurements are?
Okay, one of the tools that I have is a caliper. You know those a caliper is?
Just repeat that because you skipped a bit.
That's okay. I use a caliper. Do you know what the tool caliper is?
Is that like you make measurements with it? I think I used to use it as a mechanic in the Coast Guard.
Yeah, right. Anyways, you use a caliper and you can change it from inches to millimeters. And what you do with the caliper is I've taken actual R2 units or other figures and make the little measurements to see how many millimeters thick a rod needs to be, and then how many millimeters the hole needs to be. And then go in and use the program. It'll show you the millimeters that you make the objects, millimeters to inches.
Would you say that's a tool that, someone who wants to do 3D printing, would you recommend that as a necessary tool?
Oh yeah, it's a must.
In 3D design?
You have to have one.
Okay.
Because you'd be doing a lot more guesswork if you didn't have that.
Yeah.
One of the other things that you have to realize in the world of 3D modeling is when you're making a model, let's say you have a square object and a peg, and you want the peg to go into the square object, and you have to make, the negative of the pole. You a lot of times in the program, you take the pole and you stick it into the object you want it to go into, and you can make a negative of that area and pull it out. And you're like, oh, there's the hole that the peg can go into. You try to 3D print it. Well, guess what? That peg doesn't go into that hole. You're like, but it works on the 3D model. Why is it working in real life? You realize that either you have to do one or two things: make the hole a little bit bigger by like 10 millimeters, or shrink the hole down 10 millimeters. Then you print it out, and then you realize, oh, it fits. So I guess it all depends on, what's going to work best for you. Are you going to have to shrink the pole down, or widen the hole so the peg fits in? But if you start with a caliper and you make your measurements, you write everything down so you don't forget. 3D print it, see if it works or not. If it doesn't work, go back, make the changes of how many millimeters it will take for that pole to fit into that hole. And then once you figured it out, then you build your droid with those measurements. And then you won't have any problem. So
now, are there any other tools besides the caliper that you feel are extremely necessary?
your imagination.
Okay.
That's
So
it.
caliper, software, your printer, and imagination, and you're good to go?
And patience. Lots of
Okay. Oh, yeah.
patience. Yes. um, anyways, yeah. So I was going to show you a couple other things, and we'll discuss the process involved with that.
Okay.
Let's see here. This, oh wait, he's gone. What happened to him? Oh, I had a guy up there. Let's try it again. Move out of my way. My problem is I have too many windows right now open. Okay, can you see this guy?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's Ouija. Ouija, again, came from a video game. Not quite sure which video game it was.
Was he Shadows of the Empire?
No.
Okay.
It was another one. Rise of the Empire, I think.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember. I'm sure there's somebody out there who will know. But his name is Ouija.
Yeah.
And again, with Ouija, there was a lot of parts. And he was a hovering droid, so I had to create like a little, pull mechanism with a base, because he couldn't just, you sat him down, he'd just fall over. But he had a lot of joints. He had a lot of moving parts, and that's where what we were just talking about with having a caliper and being able to make those adjustments. As you can see that he has, elbow joints and everything. That took a long time to figure out how many, joints he needed to make all the parts move. But he's definitely one of my favorites. He was probably the most challenging as far as design goes. I couldn't even tell you how many parts he's in. I mean, I could sit here and count it, but it would be boring. Let's just say there's definitely more than 20 individual parts that I had to break him up and glue him back together. The other thing with making such small little parts is that whether or not the 3D printer can print it, and if you look, Ouija here has a, on his left side, he has a protocol droid hand, like a 3PO hand. And it took a long time for that 3D print to come out just right, because it was so tiny and so small. But I finally got it. I think it took me 5 times to print it out so that it came out right. So yeah, so this one was very challenging. Any questions on that one?
I was asking, were you ever tempted to take a C-3PO hand, cut it off, and just put that there instead?
Yeah, yes, I did, but I wanted to be pure to the figure as far as 3D printing. I wanted to be able to say this whole thing was 3D printed, and well, I got it. But you're right. I had thought about that a couple of times, after throwing things across the room.
Yeah.
So mad. But no, it turned out. But that's the great thing about it. If you just stick with it, and you'll eventually figure it out, and it'll be very rewarding. So,
About how many points of articulation would you say that droid has?
let me see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, he's a fun droid. Um, so let's see here. What else do we have? Let's get rid of him. Oh, and I think this is kind of fun, but let's see here. This next droid, we all know. This is my attempt.
Wow, Rogue One.
Yeah, this is my attempt of creating a figure that I knew Hasbro was going to eventually make, but I wanted to make it before to be the first one out there to make this guy. And he's okay. I finally got to see the actual production of the droid that's being released here in the next less than 30 days. I think 26 days. I don't know when the
27th.
The 27th. Okay.
But if you do Midnight Madness, you could
Right. Yeah.
well, it'll still be 1201, but yeah.
Yeah. So not bad for first custom of him. He was very difficult because he's very super thin, and I lost a lot of detail because he was, it's a small figure. But if you look at the 3D model, I mean, there's immense detail, but it just didn't come out in the actual print. But and he's only 5 points of articulation, so he's all right. He was a challenge because he's a figure that Hasbro is going to make. There's a certain expectation of making it look exactly like what it's supposed to. But it was my my first attempt. But
Oh yeah.
kind of a fun thing. Let's see here, what else. Here is something that a lot of people know and don't know. And this is for a project that eventually I will get around to doing it. But this is a troop transport head immobilizer. And this was a little toy that came with the troop transports back in 1978. And I thought it would be fun to make it. I actually have plans to make the troop transports, but that's going to be a lot of work. I'm still trying to finish the White Witch, so it might be a while before I actually make the troop transport. But this will be an added bonus that's going to come with the ship. And it's just kind of a fun
I like
little...
your design. I actually saw the design of that ship because you did have a picture of that on your website, and
Yes.
I love that it had the whole back, internal area, and it was really great design.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm going to bring that up and show it to you. Give me a second. All right. So here is my version of the troop transport. And it looks a lot like the original from 1978. But there are some changes.
None of the sound buttons are there, but that's a good thing.
Yeah, right. There's a little bit of the new one from Rebels that I added. But there's a lot that also I just added to it myself that I felt it needed. The first thing you notice is the front forward guns is not on the original, but on the Rebels transport, they have that. So that was one thing that I felt like, okay, I can add this. This is good. This ship is actually much bigger than the original. It's almost probably twice as big. I felt that it needed to be bigger because for two reasons. The newer figures are actually a little bit bigger than the ones that Kenner made. You know, if you compare a Kenner stormtrooper to a Hasbro stormtrooper, they are bigger. So I had to, you know, make it a little bit, you know, to that size. Um, Plus, I just felt like the ship needed to be meatier. It needed to feel more real. The next um, picture is the backside, and this is something that both Kenner and Hasbro did not have in either of the molds of the troop transport. Probably because of production reasons, it would be a lot of work. So here's the
Well,
backside.
because the original one had all those, they had the components to have the sound effects, and then I
Yes.
know with the Hasbro one, the newer one, when it opens up, there's spots in there, but I like what you did much better.
Yeah. The original 1978 Kenner version, the back opened up, but it was hollow. There was no seats. There was no detail on the inside. The new version, the Rebel version, it opens up from the top, and it only has 2 seats for 2 figures. And it doesn't look like it should be like something that where you're putting in prisoners. It just looks like extra seating for more stormtroopers. So this version, I felt that it definitely needed to have a look as if you were transporting delegates or more prisoners. And towards the back there, you can actually see there's like a little jail, and I made it so that it actually slides out from the top. You can put the figure in, put the top back on, and slide it back down into the ship itself, making it easier access for your action figure. So I'm excited. So hopefully, when the time is right, I'll be printing this bad boy out and putting it together. And hopefully by then, I may have mastered the art of making molds and be able to make some pretty awesome kits for people in the future. So other than that, I think we're good. Do you have any other questions?
I did see that you did do that diorama that we were talking about. Was it Gragra's little station?
What's the name of the
I think
character
Gragra
again?
was her name. It was from,
Ragra.
we started printing out a little,
Right.
the Pez dispenser.
Yeah, that's something that I'm kind of like, it's working on the side. I don't have actual pictures of it. I have it like right next to me. If I grab it, I can kind of show it to you. Hold on one second.
Oh yeah, grab it, grab it. I used to the other day, and I was really impressed. It's really cool. I actually have the same Pez dispenser, but what William's doing with it is it enhances it greatly, and yeah, I really liked where he took it.
So, you know, back in the Phantom Menace days, they made a lot of Jar Jar products that I think a lot of people passed up. One of them was the Pez dispenser of this like little base with one of the aliens with her table full of Tatooine frogs. And it was the scene where Jar Jar, you know, ooh, mooey, mooey, and he gets his tongue wrapped around it, and the big ugly creatures are like, ooh, wampa, wampa. You know, silly scene, but still, it's a part of Star Wars, and so we have to love it. So the Pez dispenser came out, and I passed it up because I was like, whatever, that's stupid. Until recently, and I thought, man, that would make a great little play set. So I'm doing just that. It's kind of like a side project while I'm working on other stuff. Paint is drying, or if the machine's taking 6 hours to print something out, I have something else to work on. And so far, this is where I'm at with this playset. You can see that the background has been painted and the sand has been painted, but the rest is still black, where I'll go in and, you know, paint the details. I started this little thing up here where I'll be draping some cloth as a, like, you know, a way to keep the sun off of the patrons that are buying jargon fruit or whatever. And I also created where Jar Jar used to be on this playset. I removed him, and I made another little tiny table using the 3D printer, and on the top here is like material which I draped over the table where the fruit will eventually be placed on top of, in the spot where Jar Jar used to be.
Nice.
And just to fill that empty space. One of the other things that I'm adding to it is these little Tatooine frogs that actually came from one of the Jar Jar
the figure itself, right?
Yeah, the Jar Jar figure. I gave it
I think it came with Gragra.
Did it come with Gragra? Okay, maybe it did.
Yeah. She came with a knife, and I think those she'd hold it up.
Okay.
And yeah.
Well, I gave these a better paint job. I gave them some more detail, and I gave them a gloss coat so they look wet and moist. And I'll be adding that to the playset to just enhance its look.
Oh yeah.
And so that's kind of a fun thing. So that's something for other customizers if they're wanting to create a new playset. Just go on to eBay or whatever and buy that, and make it look much better, you know. And
there is one other piece I think we should definitely show,
yeah.
and it was actually my introduction to your work. It's the Rickshaw Droid with the rickshaw.
That's right.
For, that carried Anakin and Padme.
Right. I totally forgot about the rickshaw.
Yeah, that one, you can't miss that one, because that, we can't overlook doing that one, because that one's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, that one was fun. That was also something that took a lot of work.
Yeah, look at it.
Okay. So here's the rickshaw. The Rickshaw Droid, I should say. And this was from episode 2, Attack of the Clones, during the scene where Anakin wants to race back to Tatooine to find out what happened to his mom, and Padme accompanied him, and they end up at Watto's shop. And I just was so amazed by this little tiny taxi cab, and it kind of reminded me of, it's called a rickshaw because that's what the actual thing is called. I don't know if it's China or Japan, but they have those in those Asian countries where a little guy, it has big wheels in the back, and the little guy, pulls it along, and you pay him to take you to the latest bar or whatever. There was one in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, where Short Round is driving the car and he hits it and makes it do a wheelie. And
yeah, I have a friend actually who used to live down in Florida, and he actually pulled a rickshaw for a job, and he used to do freestyle tricks, like to get extra money, for tips and stuff as he was pulling the people. And
wow.
He made a killing just between doing the tricks. He was always an athletic guy, but yeah. He was a rickshaw driver for a while, and he made a fortune.
Yeah, that might be a future job for me. I'm always looking for something. But so this is the Star Wars version of a rickshaw, and it's amazing, and I love the droid. I was also very surprised that Hasbro never got around to making the Rickshaw Droid. I understand why they didn't make the rickshaw itself, because it doesn't have weapons on it. But I wouldn't have put it past them to make it and then had, big cannon blasters on the sides.
I mean, for me, I think it has a lot of playability factor, but it's a shame that everything has to be weaponized.
Yeah. Now, see, Kenner may have had picked that up, because there was a lot of things that Kenner did that didn't require, laser blaster cannons on it.
Yeah, think about the Ewok Village. There's not a weapon on that thing. Oh, maybe the boulder.
Yeah. But now it seems like Hasbro goes, well, it's got to have some kind of play value. It's got to have some kind of guns on it. And that's what determines what's going to be made or not, I think, nowadays.
Yeah. It's
So
unfortunate.
yes, I'll show you a close-up of the Rickshaw Droid here. And let's see here. All right, did it pop up?
Yeah, it's got a lot of detail on the wheels.
Right. This guy, let me think. I'm going to count how many parts he has. He's got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 parts. So
Wow.
he's made up of 21 parts that I had to glue all together. One of the things that I did with him that's different is his head actually detaches from his body because I used a magnet instead. Little tiny magnets that I bought at a craft store. So in the 3D modeling, I used the caliber to measure the diameter of the magnet and then made the proper indentation inside the figure. So once I 3D printed it, I was able to glue in the magnet on the body and then on the neck part. So the figure's head can move back and forth freely, but it can also be popped off. I only did that because I was getting tired of like having some problems with joints not moving as smoothly as I wanted them to. And so I thought this would be a kind of a fun way to do that, an alternative way. Plus, I guess it has some play action value. If you wanted to shoot the droid, you can make his head fly off.
That would be cool.
Yeah. But I am actually going to be doing a redesign of the Rickshaw Droid because the bottom wheel, his main wheel, actually doesn't spin.
Okay.
I made the very bottom of it flat so that it would sit correctly, but I wanted to at least give it some playability. So if you were to roll it across the ground, with your hand, because you couldn't do it by pushing because it would just fall over. I wanted the wheels to still be able to move. And so that's something I'm going to change the next time I print it out. But by far, one of my favorite pieces, and unfortunately, I do not have this my collection anymore. I sold it
Oh, no way.
over eBay. Some lucky person got it.
Wish it was me.
And yeah,
Wow.
yeah, you have no idea how hard it was to let it go.
Oh, I
But
bet. Well, the nice
but
thing is you at least still have the file where you could print it, but
yeah,
now you said I remember when we spoke, didn't I, or maybe I saw images where some of that, like the fabric strapping across the top, now that's not 3D printed. Now that
that is
was actually done with another material, correct?
right. That is like a sculpting type
Okay.
material. And it's just basically a two-part clay that I like to roll them in the balls and match up the size of the balls, and then you switch them together until it's of one color.
Yep.
And then you have probably about a 2.5 hour window to work with the material before it starts to completely harden. So then you can make more organic like stuff that the 3D printer obviously cannot do. So so it's mixed medium. You have the thing that was mostly 3D printed, and then like the material above and some of the strappings. Hold on one second. Sorry, I noticed that.
You actually have a picture of the two of them in that rickshaw, don't you?
I'm sorry. What was
Like
that again?
you do also. I think I did see a picture at some point where it showed Anakin and Padme in the rickshaw, just to give people an idea of scale and how well you nailed that.
Right. I do. I don't know where it's at. I wasn't
I may.
I wasn't
Let
that
me see if
prepared.
I can pull it up,
Yeah.
if I could find it,
Okay.
because I may or may not be able to. I'm kind of scanning through really quick. Aha, I found it.
Okay.
Let me pull that up, and then there we go. Okay, so yeah, here it is. As you can see, they both fit in there really nicely, plenty of room.
Right.
And yeah, you really did an excellent job on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was very fun. It was very exciting to make that. And actually, that was my first vehicle. Um, I forgot all about the rickshaw. So I may have said that the White Witch was my first one. I'm wrong. This is the first one. And I wanted to start off small, just because, the 3D printing was so, like it's so touchy at the time. It was like I was afraid to make bigger parts because I was afraid something was going to go wrong halfway through. But I was very lucky. All the parts came out beautiful, and it just gave me hope and courage to take the next step and make a bigger ship. So, but yeah,
And how long
it's
did
great.
design time go for something like this?
Um, I really should record the time that it takes me to do stuff.
Yeah, that way when people start asking you for stuff, you could like, pay yourself appropriately for the work put in.
This one was a lot of off and on. I found myself sometimes giving up and then letting a whole week go by before, getting back onto it, because it was so different than making the droids. I was going into a new territory of 3D modeling that I wasn't sure of. So let's just say it took a long time over a long period, because I kept on going and giving up, and then playing with something else, and then decided to go back. But definitely, I'd say maybe something that probably took about 20 hours of time. So I'm going to say most things take about 20 to 25 hours.
It's probably the same with custom action figures.
Yeah.
I would like when you're doing 100% sculpted figure, it's
Yeah.
about the same, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. So you almost have to, like, if you're somebody who has a full-time job and a family, and
It's like a week of work.
yeah, it is. Trying to find that little time. Luckily, I have a part-time job, and allows me to, do that, and it's fun. It definitely keeps me occupied. But a lot of time spent on these things.
Now, because I don't have any experience really with 3D printing, there's probably a lot of questions that I might have missed, or I wouldn't even have the experience to know some of the right questions. What information did I not cover in this interview that you feel people really should know?
Actually, you did cover pretty much everything.
Awesome.
No, yeah, right. When you come around to buying a 3D printer, you're already going to be an expert. You already know.
That's good. Cool.
Yeah. The only thing
I was hoping that, like, by the end of this interview, that anybody who watches this will at least have a really firm introduction to the art and what's required. And even for people who are approaching 3D artists, don't go asking like for something for like $50 or even $100. Like it's a 20-hour job. You don't. This guy doesn't want to make $5 an hour.
No. In fact, my first figure that I sold a T3M4 for $160.
Yeah.
And I was pretty happy with that. I was like, oh, okay, this works. I would never spend that much on buying a figure, because I can make my own. But still, that made me very excited, and made me feel like it was really worth the time that I put into it. And but I will say this to anybody who buys a 3D printer: be patient. If it doesn't work the first time, don't give up. There was lots of times where I came close to just wanting to send the machine back, And luckily, my girlfriend, Deanne, was always there to calm me down and say, stop, breathe, do some more research before you just give it up. And I did just that. I took some time to calm down, jump back on, did some more research, and then lo and behold, I found out what I was doing wrong. But then you jump back onto it and you're doing it, and then you come up with something else that you don't know what you're doing, and you find yourself frustrated again. Again, take the same process. Stop, breathe, do some more research, because it's going to be worth it. Once you mastered the 3D printer, you're going to be able to make some amazing things, and you're going to be so excited, and and to show off what you've created. It feels like you've created something from nothing. It does definitely feel like technology of the future. So just have fun with it. Be patient, and just don't give up. Like I said, it takes a little bit. It's a new technology, and in the next 20 years, I have a feeling that the 3D printer is going to be a common household item. When for whatever reason it's like, oh, we don't have any more mugs in the house. Jimmy over here broke them all. Not a problem. We'll just 3D print a mug, and there you go. Hopefully it'll be faster. You don't want to wait 6 hours to get your Earl Grey,
Yeah.
And but definitely it's a new technology, so be patient with it.
Now, when you said you were coming across those hiccups and you had to do your research, where did you go to do that research? Like, what would you say were the best places to go to find the information that you needed at that time?
I went onto Google and typed up the name of the printer that I was working with and the problem I was having. You're going to have a bunch of things pop up, whether it be tutorials, some videos where people who have the same machine have the same problem, and you'll be able to get your answers there.
Okay.
Now, just to let you know, the Flashforge, when I got it, it did not come with instructions. Right? That was very confusing. I was like, what? I mean, the machine pretty much is together, but there are certain steps that you had to do to get it up and running. And then it didn't have a list of all the adjustments that you had to make to the machine. So I had to go online and just kind of
Was YouTube helpful? Is there a lot of people on YouTube who kind of walk you through things?
There's a lot of people on YouTube who have their own videos, and I think at one point I might do that myself and get online and let people know, this is what you're going to expect. It's going to be, definitely a road to travel that's going to have holes and cracks that you're going to come across. But definitely go online, go on Google, go on YouTube. You'll find all your answers there. That's how I found mine. And it made me feel really good, like I wasn't alone. These guys had the same problems as I did and was just as frustrated. And they were willing to show and share with, and so that's the best way to go.
All right, cool. Anything else you want to add?
No, except for that, I'm just really excited for Rogue One. Oh, by the way, Rogue One comes out on my birthday. Is that the best gift ever?
Yeah, I know how that feels. Last year, I think Star Wars Rebels was on my birthday. Like the opening of season 2 was on my birthday. So
wow.
Yeah, it was a good feeling.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
I understand.
Yeah. So again, good luck to everybody out there who wants to go into the 3D printing world. It's fun, it's exciting, especially like I said, right now I'm doing nothing but Star Wars toys because that's my passion, that's my love. But you can do so much more. I made a battery cover for a rare Game Boy from, I think it was Japan. A buddy of mine collects game systems, and he said, hey, this came with no battery pack. Can you make it? And I said, well, I'll give it a try. And I did. And it worked out. And it was very satisfying. So, your 3D printer can do more than making droids and land speeders. You'll be amazed at, some of the things that you can come up with that might help you with everyday household products. So have fun with that experiment. But other than that, I wanted to thank you for allowing this interview, and I want everybody to go check out Darth Daddy and Custom for the Kids and your guys' show, the customizing the Clone Wars, which I watch every time, and yeah, you guys are pretty awesome.
Oh, thanks very much. I guess, just so everybody know, we're not having customizing the Clone Wars this week, but we have Thank the Maker, so we got something else going on. And yeah, Chad's away. He's got a wedding this weekend, so we're not having it. But this is a great filler, I think. And yeah, outside of that, can you just tell everybody where we can follow your work and the best places to check it out?
Right now, all I have is a Facebook page. Thank the Maker. I'm looking into, branching out and having different websites and stuff like that. But right now, just go to Thank the Maker Facebook. You'll be able to see everything that I've done there. And just hopefully, if things continue to go the way they go, I'll branch out. There'll be more to watch, maybe even some future YouTube videos. That would be a lot of fun. Or maybe even reviewing, future toys. Here's the other thing that I wanted to say. I once put up on my Thank the Maker page, if anybody has ideas of droids that were never made, send me a message, show me a picture of a droid that had never been made and you'd like to see get made, and I'll add it to the list of all the things that I plan on doing.
I have one for you that we didn't talk about yet. Do you remember in Clone Wars there was an episode where you had those cleaning droids that on Coruscant, they went to where I guess the energy power station was, and they transformed, became a bomb?
Right.
That would be cool.
That would be cool, and what would be cooler if it actually could transform.
Agreed.
I don't know if I'm able to do that, but you never know. It might be worth something to try, but I definitely know that I'd be able to make the vacuum cleaner version of it, at least first.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of robot droids in the Clone Wars that definitely have a lot of potential of being made. But I also
know the Betty Bot would probably go over really well.
Yeah, a lot of people have said Betty Bot, but here's the problem with doing a Betty Bot with the program I have. It is almost more organic.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, and I was thinking
you almost need a ZBrush.
Right, almost. Yeah, and but that might be something. And it's unfortunate that Hasbro did not make a Betty Bot, but maybe it's because of its shape, maybe.
Oh yeah, she's a bit too shapely for kids.
Yeah, even more so than Slave Leia, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially because there's connotations that go along with that figure in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. But there's definitely a lot of obscure droid, like the droid cartoon. I finally watched all of the episodes, and there's a lot of cheesy, corny droids that I may or may not make. I mean, some of them were so cheesy that I said, well, I can either make that version and be true to it, or make a more realistic version of that droid. What it would look like if it existed in the Star Wars movies. There is one droid that I want to make. I've actually made a 3D model of it. But it will be a project in the future because it would be probably the biggest project ever. And that would be the Great Heap. And I think that would be the most craziest random obscure droid I think I could ever make. But look forward in the future for something like that.
Oh, that'd be very cool. Well, thanks very much for joining us, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yes.
And hopefully we get to do more shows like this in the future. If we come across a topic as cool as this one. But yeah, everyone take care, and may the force be with you.
May the force be with you always.